Good morning, evening, night. I don't know when you're watching this, but welcome. This is the second part of Chapter 8, Ethical Intuitionism. So here we go. Intuitionism, again, is the theory of justifying the immediate grasping of self-evident ethical truths. So what's self-evident? How do we know? How do we grasp truth? I think you should recognize that we grasp it both clearly and distinctly. Just reviewing a couple things from the first video. And we need to understand the difference between immediate and mediate. You must have those two understandings. Intuitionism is about immediate. It's not about thinking through. It's not about discussing. It's not about learning it. Got to have it clear and distinct right now. Aristotle did talk about the thatness that comes before the whatness, and he wanted to make sure that that we understood that intuitionism is like, oh, that. You may not understand it fully. You may not know what a trinket is, but you know, and you can point it at that. Understanding of the whatness comes later through discussion, understanding, knowledge building, and such. The whatness is not intuitionism, but the thatness is. Immanuel Kant then talked about space and time. That's something that everyone grasps, everyone understands intuitively, he thinks. In this video, we're going to look at the ethical intuitionism, both level 1 and level 2. This starts on page 91 in your textbook of Boylan's Basic Ethics. René Descartes is known for giving us the Cartesian tradition. What he does, what he's talking about is your mind, what's inside your skull. He, through this tradition, separates the mind with its reasoning powers and says that they are detached from the body that is part of the physical world. Reason, through reason, we can figure, examine, postulate, theorize, and do all sorts of things in an unlimited way, he says. This is his tradition. But the body has limits. He would also say that the mind might be able to interact with the body, but it does not exist in the body or even on the same plane as the body. However, I think if we took the brain out of the skull, the body would be pretty much done. But that's what the Cartesian tradition is about, the mind and the body, the brain and the thoughts that are in it. The physical brain, yeah, would be part of the body. But the conscious thoughts, the reasoning powers, and all that goes with that, he says, is separate from the physical world. Just interesting, because he's the same guy, too, that believes in intuitionism, that we kind of immediately grasp things. So he says if a proposition is both clear and distinct, then its truth or falsity is immediately grasped. We understand it. It doesn't have to be true. It can be false. But whether it's true or false, it's got to be clear and distinct. And immediately grasped versus immediately justified. Recognize that in this idea here, immediately justified. You're thinking through, talking through, having discussions and discourse. But immediately grasped, you just got it. We're not debating epistemology in this particular lesson, but I am directing the discussion about immediately grasping the truth and understand epistemology. Epistemology is about how do we know that we know stuff. It's a study about knowledge. Bullen says that ethical intuitionism as a theory aspires to do three things on page 90. Ethical truths are objective and apply to all people. They are universal truths that can be apprehended immediately. So I want you to, about every time you see universal and truths, you need to be able to recognize that you may be talking about absolutists or realists. So a universal truth, a realist will have universal truths. We just need to keep in mind those terms, and an anti-realist didn't. So an anti-realist wouldn't have intuitionism. Just saying. Okay, the distinction between good and evil does not depend upon passions and the inclination to do such and such, but is rooted in a basic grasping of the verities of truth, verities, or the truths of good and evil. In the glossary, so in the back of the book, there are different definitions for the words and terms we're using throughout this course. And he says, ethical intuitionism is an immediate grasping of excuse me, an immediate grasping of normative truths based either on social norms or direct contact with truth. Two levels. One level describes intuition as about the principles, kind of the basics, big grasping thing. And then the level 2 intuitionism we'll be looking at talks about the propriety of applying some of the principles to a particular case. So it's where the rubber meets the road. And to me, level 1 is kind of pointless if you don't even use it. So, all right. Okay, here we go. Level 1 is grasping the truth or the existence of the principles. It's just a starting point. It's understand the maxims, aphorisms, or what other thing we may be using. They may be various adages about ethical values. One ought to respect another's autonomy, or one ought to act with compassion towards others, or should not lie. Those are the maxims he's talking about. There are three philosophers who are naturalists but oppose the theory of intuitionism, and they are John Stuart Mill. He mentions these in the book. He doesn't use their full names. And Herbert Spencer and Thomas Aquinas. Those are three guys. But here's the catch. If, in fact, these naturalists are right, then intuitionism is incorrect. And what they're saying as naturalists, that they can't see it. They can't verify the truth. They can't use experiments, can't empirically study intuitionism. And that's their challenge. And that's what naturalists believe, that the truths are in nature and can be figured out by testing, examination. And if they can't, such as intuitionism, they don't see it in nature, they can't verify it, they can't study it empirically. So therefore they don't believe in it. Two types of propositional definitions. These are important just to help us leading up to a bigger question about the E.G. Moore's open question. So we're going to look at analytical propositions to help us understand what he is suggesting, and also help you understand English just a little bit, okay? So analytic propositions versus synthetic ones. Sentences have two parts. Two part of every sentence you use, there is a subject and a predicate. And the predicate is after the subject. I would be the subject. Am sitting here making a video. Am sitting here making the video is the predicate, big long part. The subject and the predicate. You could have the subject be something simple, like he sits. Well, he is the subject, and the predicate is sits, or he is sitting there. Or you could make it even longer. He is sitting there doing nothing. Or you could use it about yourself right now. I'm sitting here watching this video and I wish you'd hurry up and get through it. I am the subject, and then watching this video and I wish you'd hurry up and get through it is the predicate. So there are always two parts to the sentence. The predicate is the bigger, longer part. It's the part that's active that the subject is doing. Okay? And then people break them down even more. But this is important for us to understand, because in the analytical and synthetic propositions, we're going to take a look at the subject. That's what we're going to do with analytic statements and synthetic ones. All black ravens. So the subject here in this first sentence, all black ravens are black. The subject is black ravens. All of them are black. What's cool about this sentence is not much. It's kind of boring. It's repetitive. It speaks about itself. We already know that there's black ravens, and our black isn't giving us any new information. But right here, this is the separation. This is the subject. And right here, our black is the predicate. In analytic propositions, the predicate doesn't have anything new telling us about the subject. We already know that the ravens are black because that's part of the subject. Now, they could have changed it and made it a lot simpler for us, right? By taking out black, said all ravens are black. Then we have something new. But no, we don't have anything new because black ravens are already described. And what are they doing? They're not flying. They're not perching. They're not eating roadkill. They're just black. So what we have is an analytic proposition, because in this there's nothing new in the predicate that we find in the subject. It's rather a boring sentence. It's redundant, really. All black ravens are black. And in the classroom we would get more of these, and I would encourage you to try to understand the difference between these analytic propositions and the ones we're going. Synthetic propositions are better. Sentences, they are. Synthetic sentences and synthetic propositions give us more information. They build, okay? They're propositions where the predicate term enlarges the understanding of the subject. Synthetic is something that is built. Okay, it adds, it's growing. You have guys we know more about cars usually than girls, but you may have heard of synthetic oils. Well, synthetic oils are more than just what comes up out of the ground, and they add what they call detergents to it. You know, they're better for your engines. They're more expensive, but they're synthetic. They're, you might call them man-made, but they're added. They're a lot of additives. In sentences, a good proposition has more additives. It adds to the subject. I could use this subject that we used on the previous in the previous page, the sentence about ravens, and I already mentioned it. We could say all ravens are black. Well, at least ravens and black, there's a little additive there. Ravens are black. The predicate enlarges the understanding of the subject in that way. And in this setting, in the classroom, and in fact you have an assignment that you'll need to do this. You'll need to create 4 synthetic and 4 analytic type sentences about other things. Now, you can't use ravens and black. You can use other things. I would encourage you to use ethical things for the topic. But it's important to understand that, like, boiling water is boiling. Don't use that, but that would be an analytical statement. But boiling water has a boiling temperature of, say, what, 220 degrees. I'm making that up because I don't know. But that would give you more information when it comes to the predicate because of what's going on here. Okay, the open question test on the next page is a challenging one, but what it does, it gives us a way to take the proposed proposition and invert the subject and predicate, creating a question. And questions, are all bachelors unmarried men? Well, yeah, that's analytic. It's pretty closed. Yeah, there's nothing new. Are all black ravens black? Do all triangles have three sides? So that's how an open question works. And what they're trying to do in this is get to this definition of what good is. If you remember the very beginning of this class, and as far as the whole semester is concerned, our point is to live a good life. That's a good ethic. You want to live well, right? Well, what does that mean? It may mean something, some people may live well in New York City. Some people may just live well in Parsons. Good life might include vacations to Switzerland, or good life might just be, hey, you know what? I just want to sit in my backyard and listen to the birds. The question is, what is good? And that's a hard one to pin down. And that's the open question that G.E. Moore came up with. And good is defined as maximizing the pleasure for the greatest number. How do you maximize pleasure for the greatest number? Well, that's a rather elusive question in itself, but that's kind of what this class is about. How do we live a good life? But we're looking at how to create an open question at the moment. These questions, asking these, are called barren tautologies by Bertrand Russell. He brought this up. Nothing new in the given in these statements. They're self-defined, they're closed, there's not a whole lot to it. You would practice these questions in the class. We're not doing that. And here's more information on that. We're not doing these. We're just going to fly through these. Here's a page of good for off the internet, or this is actually off of a real dictionary that I have, and I think there are over 25 different definition ways of looking at what good is. It just gives you a challenge. And we looked at two, right? Before we looked at functional and conventional good. And what is good is a real tough question. But it's important in the intuitionism is, how do we live a good life, or what do we know what good is? It's not, so intuitionism level 2 is not dealing with the abstract or applying some principle to a particular case, but it is applying principle to a particular case. There are two parts to it. First is the recognition, kind of like looking at level 1. The second one is application. And next is, can you apply this to retirement? Can you apply it to good business? How are we going to apply intuitionism? That's the question. That's where the application comes in. And there's not a direct answer for that, and that's the challenge of intuitionism. So there's not only a challenge to intuitionism. What we're going to do, look in all of these normative theories, we're going to look at the challenges to each one so we can kind of understand them better, to also understand that, hey, maybe none of these work just perfectly all the time. But through those challenges, we're going to be looking at some dilemmas. So it's important for us to know what a dilemma, an ethical dilemma is. And this is when the agent finds himself in a moral situation that it's not in his fault, in which all choices are ethically impermissible. That is, you find yourself in a position where the answer is no good. The outcome is going to be bad either way. So that's what a dilemma is. And I'll give you a couple examples. Here's a couple of dilemmas. Have you stopped beating your wife? Well, to answer that question is either assuming or saying, yes, I've stopped, and you're admitting guilt. Or, the only way you can get out of that is a real long explanation and backing up and, wait a minute, you just put someone on a spot. Kind of like saying, hey, have you stopped doing drugs in front of a group of people? Or ask them, hey, is your mom still in jail? And then everyone looks at you. Then you start backing up and trying to answer it and realize that you've just been put in a dilemma. The dilemma is when you have 8 people in a boat and you're told you can only have 5 survive. You don't like the answer because, hey, you want all of them to survive, right? But that's a dilemma. How about being innocent before proving guilty, or being shot when you have no gun? I don't know if those are really dilemmas or not, but the question. W. Ross had a prima facie duty. That is, just on the face of things, it's what it looks like. And these are his intuitional ethical maxims. Okay, just letting you. And then there's a thought experiment. This will be in the assignment for these 2 days that I'm gone. Must you accept both level 1 and level 2 intuitionism if you're to be an intuitionist? No. You might just take number 1. It's hard to apply it to every situation. There are 3 arguments against intuitionism. There's a naturalism argument, there are 2 Humean objections, and there's a logical argument against. So the opposition from naturalism is that the laws of ethics and intuitionism would be found in nature. Yet, as we saw or heard earlier in this video, there are 3 people who don't feel like that they can see the answers or find the laws of ethics in nature. Naturalists have hunted down nature's laws. They're not immediately grasped. They feel that the ways of basing normative maxims upon facts can be attained by scientific method, and you just can't scientifically study intuitionism. Thus, naturalists and intuitionists are philosophical enemies. Furthermore, they cannot both be correct. The Humean, that is David Hume, that's who we're talking about, this guy by the name of David Hume, has an objection from number 1. He says, reason alone can never be a motive to any action of the will. It can never oppose passion in the direction of the will. David Hume doesn't like reason. He's just flat out against it. He doesn't think we make any decisions through reason. Yet he reasons this whole thing. I think it's kind of funny. He's inconsistent, but this is his reason. Reason alone can't be your motive. And morality is based upon action, and he would go so far as to say it's based on the will and their own passion. But the intuitionist will never be able to answer the question why we do what we do. The next Humean objection, David Hume objects for another reason. He says if an intuitionist says that the theory is about motivating people to act, then they are saying that this theory, intuitionism, is about justifying ethical truth claims. And if you have to justify it, it's not immediately grasped, right? So it contradicts the definition of intuitionism. The last one is our empiricists. One cannot test empirically. They cannot examine the theory, so it's a closed system. Kind of the same one as the naturalists, but it is like our analytic sentences. A black raven is black. We can't do any empirical study on that. There's no new information, and so that's the objection. It seems to be a private universe that someone has created and satisfied only certain inward-looking requirements, which are such as coherency and completeness. Ethics should be outward-looking. and would most likely require immediate knowledge. In other words, we need to talk it through. Objections against it at level 2. Because level 2 has an assessment sense to it, it cannot be immediately grasped. One is forced to compare and mediate. So you have to think through things and so on. Immediate grasping is private and not available to the public scrutiny and resolutions. Therefore, to be widely applied, publicly examined, and accepted, can't by definition be intuitionism, because of course we can't immediately grasp. That's the real key, immediately grasp. You have to remember that for the quiz and for the final. Privatism will lead to subjective and relative society. That is, if you just have your own little closed system. And the question is that what we want? This would create a society where competing positions are decided by power, not by real discussion. Boylan then has 3 responses against the critics of level 2. If one could live in a denial and have Socratic discussions, but it falls short again because you have to mediate. It's not immediate. The second response is that we live in a diverse world, and intuitionism offers a plausible explanation of our moral pluralism. Again, it's not immediate, it's mediated. And level 2, he denies it altogether. If you only accept level 1, then level 2's objections don't even apply. There would be no application, and you would be left only with prescriptions, yet no directives on how or why to fulfill them. So that's the end of the video. I just want to encourage you, with everything that you turn in, it needs to be done with the MLA8 formatting style. You have to have the double spaced, it has to have the page number, and it has to have the heading done properly. And you do not need the citation for this summary. You will have to do a summary of this video, but don't worry about the citation unless you want to practice, and I will give you input on as to how it was done correctly or incorrectly. You may do that. But remember, even citations need to be double spaced, and everything should be just double spaced. There's no extra spaces between anything throughout your whole paperwork. So I'll be back Wednesday. I'll see you then, and do well, learn a lot. The end.